Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stedman podcast. So good to be joining you on this wonderful day. I hope you have a great weekend. And today, joining me is Micah Current. Micah, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. Just thankful for another day and another podcast and just another week to do this with you.
Yeah. And for those, and again, a lot of times you guys get to see the nice polished version of Stedman podcast. Micah got on our call earlier and happened to see everything except my face, which was the background, because somehow my green screen settings on my Zoom made my face translucent. So whatever I had on the background was just covering my face, which was and everything that was green was actually showing, which never experienced that before. And then once I turned it off and turned it back on, it got fixed. But I decided, for not to scare anybody who's watching this on YouTube, I decided to just disable the green screen and all the weird backgrounds I put on my little green halo behind me. So we have a great episode. Actually, it's kind of talking a little bit about a topic that we have talked about before, but kind of want to bring it up into this new year. But before we dive right into that, weird stories gone wild. I actually want to share first because this was actually happened today. So I don't know, Micah, do you do any like side hustles?
I do. I do a couple. Well, when I lost my job in 2020 and kind of went back into full-time ministry, I decided that I wanted to go help. I felt called and compelled to go help churches with
Mm-hmm.
with things like live streaming, which is what we're going to talk about today, some marketing stuff, some website design, some things like that. And currently I help a couple of churches with their social media
Okay.
on the side
Yeah.
and just do like their marketing campaigns every week so I can make a little extra money. And then it's kind of a blessing on both ends. I get a little bit of extra money, but then some of these churches, they don't have somebody that can dedicate their time to keeping their websites up to date and their YouTube pages. And it's easy for you and I because we're used to that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
maybe a church that only has one pastor on staff, they don't have the time, or they don't know how, or they don't want to, because
Yeah.
of all the other things they have going on in their ministry life. So yeah, I do a little bit of side hustles here and there with marketing.
Yeah. Good. Because I occasionally, I've been doing stuff for years. I take surveys and they give me points or money, and then I redeem them for gift cards or whatnot. I've done couponing, but one of the things that I've done probably the last couple of years is, I know, probably shouldn't say the name of this social, but a very popular social media site that starts with the letter F.
Book, comma, face.
Yeah. They have these like viewpoint surveys, and you fill them out, you get like points, and once you reach like 1,000 points, they send you $5 to your PayPal account. Okay, and I know they started sending out a lot like in 2020 because they were just kind of seeing like, oh, are you getting your information, your COVID-19? Where are you getting your COVID-19 information? Are you getting it through social media? If so, how relevant is it to you? They ask all these questions. I guess for them, it's more marketing purposes. So they go, okay, are we spamming our Facebook? Are we spamming our social media site with all this stuff? And occasionally occasionally I'll get something where it talks about ad targeting, where they'll say, okay, we're going to give you a post, and then we'll show you a different post. And are these relevant to each other? Are they relevant, not relevant? You can't decide. And before, when I would do those type of surveys, usually it would be like, okay, here's someone on their marketplace putting like some shoes up for sale, and then next would be like a Nike ad. Are these relevant? Well, yeah, they're shoes. Someone wants to buy shoes, so it's relevant. This one that I got was so weird because it wasn't like these ads or these postings. It was just like people's like random post. Like, it's like this status if you love Jesus. And then they would show me the next thing to say would be relevant, which would be like, here, buy some Christmas cookies. And I'm thinking, no, that's not relevant. But I think I had to click the non-relevant thing, and they ask you 50 questions. And I probably hit the no relevant thing probably at least 47 times. And it was just weird. It was just like just people's posts, or, people like your grandma might put a meme, or there's been a couple times I've seen some pastors, they'll put stuff like, man, there's only two things that are great in this world, Jesus and coffee. Mm-hmm. Like coffee posts, like random, like silly coffee posts. And yet they'll compare that to, oh, do you want to buy this like rug from a shop in India? Like, no, those are not relevant at all. But it was just so strange. And sometimes I'd get stuff that wasn't even written in English. It was like, oh, here's something that's written in complete Japanese. I don't know if it's relevant. I don't know what it says. So then they go, oh, here, do you want to buy a cat? Like, I don't know if that's what it said. So I kept saying not relevant. But it makes me wonder how their algorithm works. Because if these, like, let's say these surveys kind of help with their algorithm, how much of their algorithm are they going to shift? Where just you posting something like, hey friends, I just kind of had a bad day today and, lost my job and whatnot. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, here's a Facebook ad. Would you like to get a new job? I lost my job at Miami. Hey, would you like to work at Akron U or Capital University? Like, wait, what? Like, how much is the stuff that we're just posting, just everyday posting, that's now it's going to start having tags on it, and now it's going to start producing advertisements for you? Mm-hmm. And I just find that to be very odd and weird, that because how many people like your grandma's age or your parents' age or my parents' age who, a lot of times the stuff they post on Facebook is stuff you'd find in like those chain emails back in the 90s, where you read this story about this person and you have to share it with 10 friends, or this person's son's going to die of like a life-threatening illness. And it's like, that's the stuff that gets posted on social media now. And like, now there's going to be like ads targeted to that sort of posting.
Yeah. Like I don't really, I also do marketing and stuff for the college that I work at, and mm-hmm. the division and the office that I work for. And one of my reports is she's the director of marketing, and she has a master's of communications and marketing, and she also has a bachelor's in journalism and things like that. But I think it's fascinating, and I haven't done like a deep dive of like, okay, this is how algorithms work, and this is what we, what posts are going to make things the most successful and what are going to get the most eyes on things. And I don't really pretend to know. I've never done that deep dive of things. Mm-hmm. I do understand that when you post and have a brand and market and, you create your own algorithm by posting consistently and doing the same colors and doing the same fonts and things like that. And you tend to get more eyes on your content that way, and then even boost your posting and, sponsor an event and things like that. And just to really get eyes on your product. But like on the flip side of that, like I'm also amazed that like Scott, a couple of weeks ago, I shared, I don't know if it was a quote that you said or a quote that we read or something on our show, mm-hmm. but like I posted it on Facebook and 3 people liked it. And I'm like, this is a really good quote. Why aren't more people liking this? Yet mm-hmm. I posted a picture after New Year's with my brother and sister-in-law and my wife, and we got like mm-hmm. 50 likes. Like they're just weeks apart, and I have like 1,700 friends on Facebook. So like, it's fascinating to me. It's like mm-hmm. what actually works, what actually doesn't work, and like, especially like in reference to like you doing the surveys and stuff. I've always just been fascinated, but have never done a deep dive into what that looks like.
And yeah, and I think it's also kind of hitting on that point. I think it's weird where, there's times where I would put like maybe like a theological like post, or maybe I post a Bible verse, or maybe I just kind of do like a little devotional thought. And maybe I get like 3 or 4 people who like it. And then I could put a picture of like my kids with Mickey Mouse if we're at Disney, and that mm-hmm. could get 80 likes. And I always thought it was weird. It's like, okay, here I am posting these spiritual things, and I barely get any traction, especially from people in my congregation that I'm pastoring at. And yet I could post a picture of my kids with Mickey, and a lot of people from the churches that I pastor at will like all that, but they won't like, me posting Philippians 4:9-18, or talking about, Jesus saves us from our sins. Like,
Yeah.
nope, we don't like that, or we're just going to ignore that. But cute kids in front of Mickey, thumbs up, hearts, hugs.
Scott, how long have you had Facebook? Like since the origin of it?
I've had Facebook when it was just for colleges and
Yeah, same
Anderson.
here.
Yeah, so I've had it since the beginning.
Yeah. So I remember like when I was an undergrad and I would come home from college for winter break and I'd be home or off for like a month. And I remember like staying up late and just scrolling through Facebook on my phone or on my tablet or whatever. And I remember like based on the number of friends you had, say you had 75 friends and only, 20 of them posted today, you could get to the end of the newsfeed.
Yeah.
Now that's not possible because it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And then if you hit a point where it's like, okay, you don't see stuff that your friends are posting, it's like, oh, check out this church or get this deal at Menards, or it's an advertisement space is basically what it's become, where it used to be just a platform to post stuff specifically just for college kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just it's just interesting now just how more people are on social media, and just how, I think now if I look at like my friends, I probably have over 1,000 just from stuff from college and do I talk to everybody who's the 1,000 people that I'm friends with? No, I don't.
It's also not possible. Well, you'd be sitting on Facebook all day for days.
I'm lucky if I can say happy birthday to them, because I know there's days I will miss. And
yeah, I try to make a habit of that, but it happens.
It's funny because sometimes if I say happy birthday to someone, then I'll see more of their posts, because it's like, oh, that's the first time I posted to them or said something to them in a long time. So it's like, whoa, that's wonderful. So yeah, it's just wild. It's just wild on how crazy things like that can be. Do you have a weird story?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a weird story per se, but like I shared recently, a couple episodes back that like, Alicia and I are going through this transition of, stepping out of ministry and stepping into counseling. And I'm happy to report that I've been in counseling for almost 2 months now, and it's going great. It's been very helpful to talk through some of those things, but I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but like I know that when you transitioned out of the lead pastor role in Virginia to come back to Ohio, there was a period of you weren't doing ministry. You were working at a bakery. You were working in other jobs and doing some of other things. But like, did you find it hard to find a church? Did you find it hard to go to church? Did you find it difficult during that transition phase? Because like my wife and I have visited a couple of churches, and we've went to church kind of sporadically, not all the time. We'll catch a service online if we watch stuff. I watch churches every week online because I know different people in different circles that serve at churches, and I want to see what they're doing. But like to physically go to church, we've only went a couple of times, so we're having an incredibly hard time just finding a church to just get connected to these days. Did you go through that?
Yes and no. Like, okay. I think the church that I connected with was it was the church of a mentoring pastor that I was talking
which
to
helped.
for years. Which helped, because then it's like, I'll go to that church because at least it's like, hey, and plus I think in some ways it was like, well, hey, I'm meeting with this guy, I'm talking with him at the same time. He's also kind of helping me with some ministry projects. So it was almost like I'm kind of helping, but I'm also kind of there just to kind of recharge as well. And for the most part, it wasn't a church where I just sat there and I'm just like, ugh, like at least anywhere from like what was happening on stage or with the pastors, like red flag. I think there's one time when Laura kind of got to the point where she was ready to go to church. while she was kind of going through her healing phase. Like
So
we
your
went,
wife went through that.
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I think us as a family went through that. And I think even my son still kind of goes through that a little bit, because there's times where even like last Sunday he was sitting in church and he just was not his usual self. He just kind of was dealing with some stuff. And I think a lot of it's not necessarily anything that happened at church, but I think it was more of him being younger and, you know, wanting those cuddle time during church, and he couldn't because he had to sit on the pew by himself while, mommy and daddy were up there leading worship,
Mm.
since he aged out of nursery stuff. So I think it was, and then now like my daughter's that same age and she's sitting on mommy's lap or sitting on daddy's lap or whatnot, because, my role's different. So I think there might be a little bit of kind of jealousy or feel like those needs weren't met when he was younger and now he's acting out. Like we're not sure. It's just more. But I know when we went, I remember we drove and we stopped somewhere and we just happened to park right by a car that was like God, Guns, and Girls, like bumper sticker. And she's like, "Oh, what type of church are you taking me where someone has a God's Guns?" It's like, that's probably just that person. That's not a reflection of the staff or anybody who I have talked to at this church. And so we went and it was fine. And, it was a good time. But I think especially, when we were kind of before we started going, there's times where I've been invited to places, I go check them out. Or most times it's like, well, hey, I just want to be there to support my other ministers who are in different states or in Virginia, but they're, 4 or 5 hours away. So I just want to encourage them and kind of give praise and highlight to their ministry. But yeah, but I think if I didn't have that connection, I think it would be really hard for me to even just find anywhere that I would feel, I wouldn't say comfortable, but I feel connected to, or I
Yeah,
would feel like, yeah.
I think for me that like I never realized how weird it would be to not like have anywhere to go on a Sunday morning,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I never realized how, and like, we made this transition recently right before Thanksgiving. And so you go right into the holidays, and holidays are super weird as far as scheduling. And we talked about it on a couple of, of our episodes about how, Christmas on a Sunday and Christmas Day on a Sunday and New Year's on a Sunday. It's just going to be weird because we're not, it doesn't happen very often. So I, I know my wife's experience in this, but like I never realized how, I guess, difficult it would be to find a church to get plugged into, and how strange it would be to not, on the flip side, not have anywhere to go on a Sunday. So like kind of the stipulation that I put on myself was that we would go through this season of, you know, transition and healing, but the stipulation would be that we go to church, but we don't serve for a certain period of time. And I go to counseling. Those are the two kind of things that we prayed about and believe that God
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
really doing in our life. But at this moment, but like we visited a couple of churches and we're like, okay, this is great. I really like this church, but it's 45 minutes away. So I'm not going to like go there every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's hard. Like you kind of want to go into a church situation and be like, I kind of just want to lay low. I kind of want to heal. I'm a pastor. My wife and I have been through a lot. We don't want to draw attention to this, but I don't want people to know that I'm a pastor and been serving at a church. And there's this kind
Yeah.
of like, what do you do? Like you want to keep your mouth shut and like kind of keep a low profile, but then they're like, you walk in the door and it's almost like the spotlight is like, boom, hey, we're so glad you're here. What do you want to do? How can we, how can you get connected? How do you serve? How do you do this? And it's like, right. So I guess that's my weird story, just kind of an update on my life. And
Yeah.
just I just never dreamed it'd be so difficult because I want to go and I want to serve, but like I kind of need to take that break. But I'm afraid at
Yeah.
the same time, like, am I going to lose it? Am I going to lose my ability to serve? Am I going to lose my passion for what I've done for so many years? But I think I know the answer to that, but I just need to be.
Yeah. And I think those are the same questions that I went through, because even when I decided to take a break, it's like, okay. And then, I started applying to places and they asked the question, why'd you leave your last church? And it's like, well, and I would kind of just briefly tell them why I left. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
like, like, it was almost like one of those things where it's like, but I don't want to be like, dishonest and say like, oh, I just felt like it was time for me. The Lord called me away. It's like, well, kind of didn't go down like that. So I'm kind of being transparent, but sometimes it's like, well, if I'm too transparent, then, it's going to bite me in the butt. But, at the same time, I think that, I was very transparent with the people who hired me to serve right now. And, they checked everything out and they said, okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's the same thing that our buddy Jordan went through. He was transparent too. And, they did their research and they did everything and they kind of found out like, yeah, okay, you know what? Yeah. I mean, you know, some people may go like, oh, okay, and not, kind of think that something was a red flag was there, but they're like, nope, we definitely think that definitely agree with the person who's applying to the job that their situation was legit. So we're going to give them. But I think the weird thing for me is not just necessarily not going somewhere on Sunday, but doing something else on Sunday morning. Like, I think it was weird, like the first time, hey, we're going to go to an amusement park on Sunday morning and we're going to have fun as a family. And it's like, all right, I'm riding roller coasters. This is fun. But at the same time, I feel guilty because I'm not sitting in church or I'm not, doing anything because I'm just been used to being at church on a Sunday, every Sunday for, 7 to 8 years. And it's just weird when you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Well, and two, like it's kind of like retirement in a way, right? You do a job for 30 years and then you retire, and then you're like, what are you supposed to do with your life now? Because you have this time, right? So I've been going to church since I was born as a pastor's kid, all the way up through high school.
Mm-hmm.
Got right into ministry when, went to seminary, got into ministry. I've been doing ministry for over 10 years. And now I'm, my mid 30s, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? This feels weird. Like,
Yeah.
I can get up and go to the coffee shop, or I can get up and, work on a project on my house, or I can go to church if I want to, or I can not go to church if I want to. It's a weird season. It's just a weird feeling for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely. So the topic today we're going to talk about is we're going to kind of go back and look at live streaming again. I know that's something that you and I have talked about last year. We kind of talked about live streaming and more specifically, now that the pandemic was over, should we give up doing live streaming? That was kind of the main topic. But as we're approaching 2023 and live streaming, it seems like it's kind of a staple for churches now. So I want to kind of revisit that topic and kind of discuss the topic of live streaming. And I think, there's just so much stuff out there now. It's like before when it seemed like only the bigger churches, your Elevation, your Bethel, or even like I think about just down the road for me is the Refugee Road Church of God, which is a Bishop Timothy Clark's church, where they actually have airtime and they're on local television. And they've been doing that for years. So the idea that now we go from the big players have the live streams or the TV contracts to now Grandma and Grandpa's church out in the boonies now has live streaming. So it just seems like the whole live streaming market, especially for Sunday morning, has just kind of become a marketplace now for people to explore and people to even get overwhelmed sometime with the options that they have. So Micah, how has, especially you talking about how you're kind of in that, I'm not serving. Sometimes I go to church. Sometimes I watch stuff online, or sometimes I just watch my friends and see what they're doing on their online service. How has it been for you just seeing live streaming for the last couple of years and kind of where we're at now with live streaming in 2023?
So, I've shared on this podcast that one of my last full-time roles in ministry was the director of video media for a church. And, we're a multi-site campus and we have multiple live streams on Sundays, and, did the church online platform where we had, the service playing throughout the week and all these things. And I think I sent a video to you over the weekend where it was like, what does church live streaming look like in 2023? And is it even worth it anymore? So I guess when you and I were talking about doing this episode, it was like, you know, do churches continue to do live stream? Sure. Is it getting anywhere with your audience? Maybe. Are you reaching people? Who knows? And you talked a little bit ago about algorithms. Like, are those algorithms accurate? Are they not? Does your church have a decent following online? And so, all of those are common questions. And I don't think, because churches were live streaming before 2020, before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about some of the bigger churches like Bethel and your Elevation and your Jesus Culture and Hillsong and bigger churches and bigger situations who have the capacity, have the staff, have the people that can put on the production that you're going to see like on a television show. Like it truly is, remarkable to see how well some of these churches produce their content every week. And so, I guess the first question I would ask is, is it worth it anymore? And I'm not just saying, hey, let's just shut this stuff down because it's, nobody's watching it, but like, in comparison to, an Elevation or a Bethel, like people can just as easily turn on one of those churches' live streams and get a better quality stream than what you're going to get in, the small local church.
Mm-hmm.
And A, do you have the volunteers? B, do you have the time and the commitment from those volunteers? And finally, are you putting a product out there that, I don't want to say compete, but is it the quality there to make yourself stand out enough so you can actually have a following online? Mm-hmm. I know I threw a lot at you, but what do you think about all those things?
Yeah, I think, oh man, that's a lot of great stuff. I think the big thing for me is when I look at kind of the live streaming thing, and I think I say this all the time when we talk about any type of ministry, there's a part of me that says, okay, there has to be a vision or a purpose to what you're doing for a live stream. I think when 2020 hit, basically the purpose was no one's coming to church. We need to continue to get our message out there so that people can still have church even though they're at home in their pajamas. So let's get a live stream set up, as quickly as we can. So then that way we can broadcast our services to our congregation at home. And I think for a lot of churches, that was the reason why you have an online presence or a streaming presence, is just that alone. I think over time, some of these churches who have been doing it, maybe they have been kind of putting more effort into them. Maybe they are gaining more traction because they are seeing the numbers. Maybe they're seeing like, hey, we have 8 people that show up to church every Sunday, and yet I have 70 people who are watching us online. So now how do I reach those 70 now? And I think for that aspect, it's like, okay, then, you at 2023, is your purpose still, well, let's just broadcast it so people can watch at home? Or are you going to say, okay, how can I be missional in what I'm doing? How can I be missional in reaching out to the people, not only the people who attend church or say they're members of my church, but for those who are watching it who may be curious about church? Maybe they are liking something about our service. So how do I engage those individuals? And I think when you ask those good questions and you start to have more of a vision for your streaming presence, then that's going to help shape your vision, your goal for your live stream. Now, I mean, if you're feeling like you're doing something and you're not getting traction, but your whole purpose is just to have something so that people can watch at home, then, I guess that's great, but I think at the same time, if most of your people are back to normal services and you're just not having that option anymore, then you might just want to say, okay, well, maybe it's time to not put a lot of effort into this anymore.
Do you feel
Um,
like it's ran its course, the live stream thing?
I think 3 weeks ago I might have said yes for some churches, and not all. I would say for some churches I would have said yes, especially those who are not doing more to really engage people with their online presence. But with the what is this, like the winter storm Elliott or whatever we just had,
Mm-hmm.
like there are some people who canceled their Christmas Eve services, but then next thing you know, their live stream's up and running, and you just see the pastor sitting in their office
Living
or
room.
sitting by their living room and was able to do the Christmas Eve service for people in their pajamas, because it's like, well, I have this thing that I've just prepared. So let me lead people. Or, I mean, there's a time where when we were still not meeting and we had an Easter service, I did a virtual foot washing thing. And I also told people, hey, we're going to do communion. So here's a bread recipe if you want to make your own bread. And this is something you could do as a family, or you could just buy stuff, however you want to do. And when we got to that point in the service where we did communion, I read the gospels and broke bread on camera and said, take and eat. This is my body broken for you. This is my blood shed for you. And did that and led people through communion, whether people did it right exactly when I was live streaming it, or whether people caught the replay and they're just doing it along when they got a chance to. But still, it was an opportunity for people to do it because something happened or something was canceled. So it hasn't ran its course. I think just I would say no, but I think what has run its course is if you're only doing live stream just to have it for those who are still not wanting to come back to church for whatever reasons. If you're just doing it for that, then I think just having no vision, or that is the only vision for your live stream, I think that's ran its course. Because I think now you either have to either dismantle it or you got to elevate it. And I think for the smaller churches, you can't, if you don't have the resources or the people to help elevate it, then you're kind of out of luck in some ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that those are really great points, and I think that it's I guess by ran its course, I mean I meant to say that what I meant by that was that we got really into the habit of okay, we have online church, we have online
Mm-hmm.
church, we have online church, and the product, it's like if you have the product and the product is going well, is it becoming stale? I guess was my premise behind that question to you.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I think one of the great things that Elevation did so well during the 2020 edition of what they did with live streaming was the fact that they, like, for example, Stephen Furtick was preaching to an empty room. I mean, he had his videography team there and he had his worship team there, but like other
Mm-hmm.
than that, they didn't have a full room of people there during COVID. But what they did, Scott, was they put a big flat screen TV in front of Stephen Furtick out of the camera shot, and they had the chat going for the YouTube channel. So he
Mm-hmm.
could see what people were saying in the chat, and he became very interactive with what they were doing while he was preaching. And he was like, if God has blessed you, put it in the chat and tell us how. And he's like, oh, Scott, I see he blessed you financially this year. Or, Micah, I see that he blessed you with a new job this year. Like all of these, he became, that was one of the things that did really, really well early on was like, okay, they became interactive. So they kept reinventing the wheel. Another church is Crossroads Church here in Cincy, and I've mentioned them before, but they did this whole session during the summer of 2020, and I think even in 2021, where they called this sermon series like "Move Out," I think it was, and like it was like get out of your comfort zone. And what they did was they literally took a van and they branded the van, they branded the colors and everything like that with the series "Move Out," and they went out into downtown Cincinnati and they filmed their sermon series outside. They filmed worship outside. They filmed their teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and they went all over the place. And so, like every week, you're getting a different sermon in a different location by a different pastor. And so it was really cool to see, you know, how they continued to reinvent church online, and it was a product that was consistently different in a good way, because it wasn't just, okay, Scott, you're preaching today, yeah, great, so let's just hit record on the live stream and, you know, go through the service like it is. Like, you're just giving people that, I guess. Does that make sense? Like, it's like the
Mm-hmm.
product, so the product doesn't become stale. And a lot of churches have gotten to the point where they just come to church, they do what they were doing in the building before they had live stream, and they're just pressing record on the camera, or they're just pressing go on the live stream.
Yeah.
And so it's just, there's not a lot of interaction with those folks who are watching online.
Yeah. And I find that to be yeah, and I think that's kind of the big thing too that I find so fascinating with that is, you know, when you think about the size of Elevation Church,
Mm-hmm.
very rarely are you getting any kind of reaction from Stephen Furtick. I mean,
It's not.
besides people standing up and clapping, or people going, "Yeah, pastor," or "Amen," or, I mean, you're not getting a interaction. But I mean, the fact that he was able to sit there and have a monitor where he could look at the chat and basically say, "Oh, hey, I see that's happening, you know, blessings to you," even whether that person's a person, or even if it's not like their name, it's just like, you know, Bookworm 587. He can say, "Oh, Bookworm 587, I see God's blessed you with this. God bless you." Like, you know, but you find out, oh, that's actually Billy who comes to church, then yeah, you know, there you go. And I think that's a big thing too. I think the other thing that makes it harder, because most times the way churches are set up, especially now that people are going back to in-person services, I don't think Stephen Furtick's having that monitor back up on the screen on the stage anymore, because it's more of a blocking issue than anything. But I think, you know, has that vision of really connecting with people through that thing, has that kind of gone away, because things are kind of going back to normal, especially with their live stream. And I would say, you know, probably don't get that interaction as much anymore than you did couple years ago, because of the fact that everything's kind of getting, you know, everything's kind of back to some sort of normalcy, or at least normalcy after the pandemic, this new normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to focus on and really look at. So
Well, too, like, I think, you know, having having a person in place to do that is kind of important too, especially if you're in a smaller church. Like, not every church is going to have somebody that knows how to do video and
mm-hmm.
knows how to edit video and produce stuff to go online. Um, and I think a lot of churches that I just mentioned just a few minutes ago, like, they they just got used to the idea of, okay, we're just going to press record and go live, but they didn't really address the audience that they're, you know,
Mm-hmm.
preaching to. They you know, and a lot of churches who talked about side hustles, when I was doing consulting a lot in 2021 and 2020 with churches, I was like, you got to think of churches two-dimensionally, right? You got to think of the physical people that are in your audience, in your congregation, in the room, and you got to think of the people that are watching online.
Yeah.
You know, you got to say, hey, good morning, welcome to church, welcome to those who are watching online, right?
Yeah.
When the pastor gets up to preach, he or she has to go, you know, good morning, you know, we're so glad you're here. And for those who are watching online, you know, thanks for being
Mm-hmm.
here today. Thanks for watching this message. Share it with a friend, subscribe to our channel, like, engage with your audience. And I think that's another common thread that I'm seeing, where churches aren't seeing their live stream, or they're not seeing or retaining their live stream audience as a result, because they've just forgotten about the folks that are watching online.
Yeah, it's and I think that's kind of the thing. It goes back to why do we watch TV? Well, because just having those cuts, it keeps your focus. It keeps the audience focus when you're making those cuts because you're seeing different sides. Even when you think about reality TV, yeah, the drama's there, but you have to remember that they're filming, especially like you think about Survivor, they're filming long hours, and a lot of that stuff's just getting cut and leaving on the cutting room floor.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can cut, or especially like when you watch like a live theater stage, you're not seeing like just a one still shot of the theater. You're seeing multiple cameras making cuts or zooming in. I mean, Micah, you and I both watch wrestling. If we were just to watch a wrestling match and they didn't do the different angles or the different views of the ring, and we're just watching
one straight shot,
I mean, we're not going to be watching it very long. We're just going to be like, we'll turn it around, because I think even with the commentating and the cutting, it creates a culture. It creates a storyboard that entices you. So when it comes to church live streaming, you have to do one or two things. You either have to have multiple cameras to do those cuts to kind of keep people interested, or as the speaker, you're going to have to engage with that online audience. It's the same thing when I stream. I mean, I could sit there and I can play games, but I talk and I will talk to people. And sometimes I can see who's in the room, who's not in the room. And sometimes, some days it's just me playing a game, and it's a game no one really cares about, so I'm not getting any views. But when I'm playing a game where I'm starting to get 10, 20, 30 people viewing, then I'm just saying, hey, how are you guys doing today? Thanks for joining. Thanks for subscribing. I appreciate it. And I'm always kind of customizing my own Twitch channels to kind of do more. So like when I do get a new subscriber, do I get my little alien here and I make him do a little dance or twerk or whatever? For those who are on YouTube, you'll definitely see that. But, I think with that, you're basically, I'm kind of creating a show based off me and my personality in whatever game I'm playing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you have to do that.
Well, and that goes back to the whole conversation of, does your church have somebody that knows how to do video? And also, does the church that you're attending, are they on board with the vision of, okay, this is how we're going to do live streaming? We're going to have an online welcome video that's separate from what's going on in the room. We may have video announcements, right? Do you prepare those video announcements for just the people that are watching online, or do you prepare the video announcements for those who are just in the room, or do you do two separate ones, one that's going to be online for people that are watching and one for the people that are in the room, that can connect people who are watching online who may not even live in the same state, but they're watching your live stream? This is how you can get connected. How can we pray for you? Do you have digital life groups, things like that? It's amazing to me that we're having this conversation in 2023, and we're still having these conversations where churches aren't on board with furthering the kingdom of God because they want to do things a certain way.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. And I think it's also, I think maybe the challenging thing too is maybe you have a pastor who really has a vision for their live stream and really wants to use it to reach people and do that. And maybe they have a good idea or a good plan, and maybe just doesn't have the volunteers, or maybe the issue is you get everything in place, but, and I hate to say it, but there's some pastors who they're just not very
tech savvy.
Not tech savvy. I don't think, especially when they're on camera, they just don't like being on camera. And they don't have the personality that makes for good, I guess that makes for good television,
or they get super nervous about it.
Yeah.
They get super nervous about being on camera.
And then,
which is funny because you public speak for a living.
Well, I think there's a fear. I think the fear is, if I say something in a group of people, like, for example, Michael, let's say you're attending my church and I'm preaching, and let's say I flub something up, instead of saying, Father, forgive us. And I'll use a line that my grandfather said years ago when he was a minister, Father, forgive, instead of saying, Father, forgive us for our faults, Father, forgive us for our farts. Now, in front of a bunch of people, I may get some chuckles, I may get some laughs, but guess what? It's just confined into those people who are at that service at that time, and it becomes kind of a source of legend in storytelling. I say it on camera on live stream. Let's say just some random YouTuber happens to find that clip, and guess what? It's on TikTok. It's now being memeified. It's now being part of a remix. It's now being part of a sound sample for, Kanye West's new rap album. Forgive us for our farts.
His second Christian album.
His second Christian album. But so I think even sometimes the fear with being on camera is not necessarily if I make a mistake, it's now on there for the whole world to see. Or if I say something that's kind of ill-fitting, we now have footage. We can find out. I mean, and again, I see a lot of cringeworthy stuff through churches stuff on Facebook or TikTok or social media all the time. But now that's kind of out there. And it's one of those things where it still kind of becomes prevalent and then it dies off and then it comes back again because someone else finds it and then they revitalize it. And so you have to really look at some of these things and maybe there's a part where a pastor, who's very into the toxicity of our news media where they feel like, oh, I have to be careful with everything that I say because then someone's going to take my words and blow it out of proportion. And I just don't want the heat and I don't want the church to feel the heat because someone's taking my words out of context and blowing us up. And I want to, protect my church from, the wolves of social media. And there's that type of paranoia, I guess, whether it's real or whether it's just in one's mind or the fear of that could happen. I think people are just more on guard where, Stephen Furtick could say whatever he wants and people give him a lot of crap about it. But you know what? He don't care. He doesn't care. I mean, and I think that's always the big thing that I always hear about, like when it comes to media, whether good news and whether it's good or bad, all news is good news because again, it's going to get you publicity, whether it's good publicity, bad publicity, publicity is publicity. And if it gets you more views, more followers, more criticism, it's just going to continue to spread. And I think that's how some of these like churches or cringy churches that I see, it's like, well, how do they get a following? Well, I think probably there's some people who legit like the pastor or this church and all their cringiness. But I think they get a following because there's other people who follow them because they want to say what type of weird, crazy stuff is this person going to say next? And and how can I capitalize on that to get more views for my page? Because I'm posting about, did you hear what Pastor John said? Or Pastor Billy Bob or Pastor Susan? Like, it's like now it now becomes part of public spectacle. And anything you say or use can be memeified and used to gain another person's like and follower count.
Yeah, and I think it's that could also be generational thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we talked about generational things on here, but like the I know a friend of mine who's a pastor in the area where we live. He's an excellent communicator, but I remember filming a video for their website and their YouTube page or something, and it was just literally just me and him in a room, and it was like a 90-second video, just saying, "Hey, welcome to church. We're so glad you're here." Or welcome to our YouTube page, or this is what our church is about. And he did great, but he was an absolute nervous wreck. Like he's a middle-aged man, sweetest guy you'll ever meet, but he can preach in a room full of people and he's fine. But he gets super nervous when he's, and I remember him telling me that, he struggled when COVID happened because how am I supposed to preach to an empty room? And a lot of people went through that, right? Like for the first time in their ministries, they were, not performing, but preaching in front of nobody and to a camera. Same thing with you talked. Yeah. I said performing because I thought about wrestling because like there was a period where wrestling was in front of nobody. Oh and so for the first time in these performers' careers, they were in a room full of nobody. Right? They were in an empty room.
Yeah, they had to even pump. I think they had to pump sound in there because how do you go like, come on, and try to get the crowd riled up like you're used to, and it's like you're throwing your hands up trying to get an empty audience like.
I think I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's ran its course, but I think that if I would encourage, if I had an encouragement for this episode, it would be like try to be more creative. Like
Mm-hmm.
just try to test the waters with what your online audience is seeing as far as like, okay, I'm gonna preach a separate sermon and I'm gonna preach it outside. I'm gonna preach at a coffee shop. I'm gonna preach in front of the fireplace at my house, or I'm gonna do a series like in the woods where I'm preaching, get like different scenery involved, get different shots and get different,
Mm-hmm.
angles from those shots, do multiple cameras, you know, like preach sitting in the pews, preach, from your office, like give your audience something different to look at each week so that you can keep them engaged. It's no different, Scott, than if you're watching a TV show and like the series is 10 episodes long. Each episode they want you to be kind of like on a cliffhanger. So like what's the next episode going to be? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen the next episode? And so I don't know, man. It's just interesting to me how churches have lost sight of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
um uh, you know 10 years ago, live stream was this revolutionary thing, and we're going to put church online for people to see our church. And now it's like, okay, is it stale? Has it run its course? I can say
Yeah.
yes and no for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Just my encouragement would be let's be more creative in what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think even with creativity, there's a lot you can do to kind of break the whole lecture form. Um, I mean, even if you're just going to do like a little Easter passion play, I mean, you can really now have the opportunity to really set up your cameras, or even if you just have one camera, just set it up in different pages. And if you have someone who can edit it, or you have to hire somebody to edit it for you, they can edit, make it nice and neat. And now you have a really good you have a really good performance place that you can do. Or maybe instead of just doing, I'm going to lecture to everybody, actually have a dialogue and kind of, have that thing where, hey, I do have a monitor in front of me so I can see all the feeds from our Facebook and YouTube pages. And then that way I can interact with people, or people sending your comments. So I'll be discussing them live, or some of the challenges that you're facing, or some of the scriptures that you have difficulty reading. You can do those sort of things now. And it's okay, because I feel like a lot of times when pastors switch up the mold of just the normal lecture kind of platform that's been part of the church life for years, when someone does something different, I think the congregation usually responds very well, and it's something that they always remember, because it's something that is different from the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, friends, let us know what you think. Do you think that live streaming has kind of run its course? Or are you kind of like with both Micah and I, that we feel like that, hey, this is a great opportunity for the church and their proclamation of the word to be a little bit more creative, to try to test the waters, do something that's different, to kind of see if it works and see the responses? Or maybe you're someone who you're just like, man, all this sounds great, I just don't have the resources, the time, or the people to do it. Let us know what you think, and you're on live streaming. Let us know how you're tackling your live stream. Maybe what you're posting can be a way to help people who are listening to this podcast, help them in their ministry as well. And again, we'd like to know, either through email, through just posting on our social media sites, on our YouTube site, if you're watching this. Guys, again, this has been wonderful. This has been great. We're so glad to just be able to share this type of information with you to help you in your ministry. And may you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be on next week with another episode.